Hey guys, EIGA here. Today we're taking a look at my first open-air build featuring the Modable SYS8. This open-air case comes from Slovenia and it's manufactured in-house by a company whose bread and butter happens to be CNC machining. So if there's one thing I'm expecting here, it's top-tier build quality. Let's start by taking a look at what comes in the box when you order one of these. The frame comes flat-packed in an unassuming box, but excellently protected with custom-cut foam pieces. Right in the center we have the 2-slot GPU bracket. Next up we have an unsleeved power button cable, a bag with 4 power supply screws and a high quality ball head Torx key. Moving on, we have the power button assembly, and I have to say, I already like the way this looks. The included power button feels very premium as well. The final bits we have here are 2 45-degree angle adapters, and then of course we have the frame itself with the feet and the PSU bracket secured to it for shipping. For today's build, I'm going for a maxed out air-cooled build. For liquid cooling, there's a number of accessories available on the Modable store, like this radiator mount for instance. The SYS8 uniclamps, where the name of the frame comes from, function as mounting points that can be attached pretty much anywhere, and they can also rotate at 4 different angles. Add one of the 45-degree adapter pieces to the SYS8 clamp, and you see where this is going. Customization is the name of the game here. Now, like I said, I'm going for an air-cooled build, and unlike my T1 build where I was limited by internal volume, with an open build like this one, there's really no size limitations. That's why for the CPU, I decided to go with the massive Assassin IV tower cooler from Deepcool. It has fantastic performance, it's super easy to install, and I wanted to go for a sort of enclosed look to balance out the open nature of the build. Unfortunately though, not long after I had already ordered this cooler in preparation for this build, Deepcool ended up being banned in the US due to failing to meet sanction restrictions. So yeah, as a substitute for a maxed out air-cooled build, I would most likely pick the old generation Noctua NHD15 in Chrome X Black. I do find the Assassin IV super easy to work with, and it was a breeze to get it installed. So if you are able to get it and you like the way it looks, then I can definitely recommend it. The CPU I'm using is the Ryzen 9 7950X3D, slotted into the B650EI motherboard from ASUS, and topped off with 64 gigs of RAM from Corsair. To change it up a bit this time, I used a phase change pad instead of the usual thermal paste, and I even made this nifty 3D printed tool for cutting the pad into the irregular shape of the AM5 heat spreader. Phase change pads have a similar performance to the best thermal pastes, but with superior long-term reliability. There's no real benefit for me using one for this build, but I did it anyway to show you guys what it looks like. With the cooler now installed, it was time to slot in the 4090 Founders Edition card. The 2-slot GPU bracket initially gave me pause, as I was worried the 3-slot card might pose a problem, but this thing is absolutely rock solid, like really solid. I'm using those 45-degree angle adapters to mount the feet to the frame, and this is where I first get a glimpse of just how well this whole thing is machined. The SYS8 clamps I mentioned earlier have a very clever way of gripping onto the frame rails. The clamps are actually a 2-piece design. When loosened via a single Torx screw, the clamp freely slides along the rails, and when fully tightened, it becomes friction locked in place. I was worried that this process of clamping and adjusting the positioning of various parts would lead to visible wear on the frame, but I was pleasantly surprised to see there's none of that. Initially, I was somewhat disappointed with the anodized finish on the frame. The frame has a very fine, smooth black finish, but you can definitely make out machining marks and other blemishes here and there. On the other hand, I really appreciate the durability of the finish, and I'd be more disappointed about scratches than I am about machining marks that are only visible up close. Still, it's something that needs to be pointed out, especially at this price point. I was nearly done with attaching the feet to the frame when I discovered that you can adjust them to sit a bit more forward by removing the Modable logo rubber inserts to reveal a secondary mounting position. This is neat, as the center of gravity on my build was basically on the limit of toppling over. After finally getting the feet onto the frame, it was time to mount the power supply. The SYS8, despite being an open frame, is still purely small form factor. As such, we only get an SFX compatible PSU bracket. I'm using the new Corsair SF1000 power supply, which replaces my trusty SF750, which I've used for the past couple of years. Some may even say that there's a new goat in town. To go with that, I have a new set of custom cables, shout out to Cablester. Just like everything so far, the PSU bracket also comes with its own set of neat little touches. The countersunk holes are mirrored, so you can attach the PSU from whichever direction you want, and we have not one, not two, but 3 attachment locations for a SYS8 clamp onto the bracket. I decided for a fairly obvious PSU placement behind the motherboard to help balance out the center of gravity a bit more. And with that, we're pretty much done. There's no case fans to worry about, and I really like that. All we have to do now is run cables from the PSU to each of our components. One cable to the motherboard, one to the CPU, and one to the GPU. That's it. Well, not quite. We still need a way to turn the thing on, other than using a flathead screwdriver to short the power switch pins. Remember that unsleeved power button cable from the unboxing? I still needed to deal with that. From what Modable has been telling me, they will be replacing this with a simple black cable and a couple of alternative button options, one of which will be a low-profile mechanical keyboard style switch. But for now, I couldn't just use this cable as is, as it would just look completely out of place. I didn't have any sleeving with a large enough diameter to make it look decent, so I decided I wasn't going to use it. I had DuPont connectors and pins left over from my Voron 3D printer project, so I made my own custom cable in the exact length that I needed. Okay, now we're finally ready to power the thing on. Let's talk about open cases then. Yes, you will get more dust on your components, but dust can be cleaned. I use a powerful computer blower to blow most of the dust away, and then I wipe down fan blades and surfaces with a microfiber cloth. That's really all I do to keep my parts looking new. But this is a case-by-case basis thing. If you live in a dusty environment or you frequently spill drinks on your desk, then common sense would dictate that maybe it's not the greatest of ideas to go for an open-air build. Let's face it, at the end of the day, we're dealing with an over-engineered test bench. What you do gain, however, is excellent cooling performance. It's as good as it gets. There's no case fans, there's no restrictive panels or blocked-off vents. If we take a look at the footprint of the completed build, it's actually smaller than my Form T1 build with its 10 liters of volume. The overall volume taken up by the SYS8 is larger, true, but effectively it's still very manageable, despite using one of the largest CPU tower coolers on the market. I managed to squeeze it on my desk in between my 32-inch screen and speakers. It's a bit tight and it's not ideal, but it works. I assume that most people would choose to display their build more as a centerpiece. Just take a look at some of these insane custom loop builds others have already built with the SYS8. Personally, ever since I first used the BC1 Mini bench table from Stricom, I just loved the convenience of being able to quickly swap out components and tinker with my system. The SYS8 takes that convenience and combines it with a much more attractive presentation and a lot more customization. Let's quickly go over some performance numbers. As a completely unscientific test, I'm going to compare this to my previous build, the insanely optimized air-cooled build I did in the Form T1. Just how much more cooling performance do we get with no case and a massive CPU cooler? If we take a look at my Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty soak test, we get quite a dramatic difference on the CPU, with average temperatures settling at about 5 degrees lower. All this while running quieter, as you would expect. I do think, however, that the tiny XP90 X47 full copper cooler in the T1 build performs more than admirably for its size. The trade-off is there, but for cooling an X3D chip in the Form T1, it's glorious. Let's also take a look at GPU temperatures. We get a solid 2-degree improvement on the SYS8 with the same fixed fan speeds between the tests. Again, this is also expected as the GPU is now as unrestricted as it can possibly be. And in more demanding scenarios, I'm sure the difference can be even larger. I was also curious just how much productivity performance I was losing on the CPU with my previous setup in the Form T1. Taking a look at the multicore score in Cinebench 2024, we get a difference of about 88 points or about 4.3%. This score difference is with both configurations running at what I consider to be reasonable max fan speeds for daily use. Okay, the question on everyone's minds is probably whether or not I choose this setup over a small form factor build in an actual case. I don't have a simple answer here. I do love the build quality of the SYS8 and how you can just throw the heaviest components on it and it's absolutely rock solid. Working on it is a blast and you can really tell that a lot of attention to detail and fantastic craftsmanship went into making it. That said, I'm not sure I see myself using the SYS8 as a one and done build. Obviously, the nature of my YouTube channel means that I'll be taking things apart and rebuilding quite frequently, but that aside, I do see the SYS8 as more of an open air framework for constantly evolving builds and for people that really like tinkering or have a certain concept in mind that they want to put on display. I'm sure I'll come back to the SYS8 and build with it again, maybe even a custom loop build in the future. I only really have two complaints regarding the SYS8. First, the anodizing and the visible blemishes and machining marks. The durability of the finish is top-notch, but the look itself is a bit of a letdown for me. And secondly, the power button cable. This is something that will be addressed in the coming months, but know that if you purchase now, you will have to deal with the currently included cable in some way. Probably you will have to make a custom one for yourself. I'm sure enthusiasts have no issues making their own power switch cables, but the SYS8 is aimed at first-time builders as well. Currently, the Modable SYS8 is available for a limited time 25% discount at a price of €291 plus shipping. Personally, I find the price to be fair, taking into account the quality of the machining and the fact that this is a product made in the European Union. But for the price, I expect the attention to detail to extend to the finish and to the included power button cable. I am really curious what you guys think, so please let me know down in the comment section. And do consider subscribing or even becoming a channel member. In return, you get some sick custom badges and exclusive perks for your support. That's it for this one. I'll see you guys in the next one really soon. Bye for now.